Greetings! You're listening to Anton Kuznetsov and watching the Vedavrat YouTube channel. Today, we're covering a highly specialized topic in Jyotish Vedic astrology, the influence of the ruler of a nakshatra on the grahas located in the nakshatra, on the phavas ruled by these grahas, and on the phava where the graha that rules the nakshatra is located. This is a somewhat indirect description of the interactions in a birth chart. So there you have it. And these are very subtle, profound points, analyses, aspects of chart analysis in Jyotish. So there you have it. And it's clear that this is of interest to a very small number of people who not only practice but also study Jyotish. Nevertheless, we answer questions from our viewers, listeners, and sponsors. And since such a question was asked and we have the opportunity to give our own version of an answer, we made this video. So there were two questions. I'll read it separately later at the right time, so there will be two main parts to this video, but before that, there will be a preliminary part. So we need to understand that there are the main factors in the birth chart: Grahas, Rashis, Bhavas, and Nakshatras. And you need to understand them, comprehend their essence, their main meanings, and the methods of applying them. And the most important thing is the grahas. Rashis are second, phavas are third, and nakshatras are fourth. And knowing the grahas, you can already say a lot about the birth chart. By interpreting the grahas in phava, you can say a huge number of answers, and this is very important. Grahas in phavas. That is why the book Brihat-Samhita devotes many chapters to the interpretation of phavas in Gachara in transit, Gachara Kundala, transit chart, Vivaha Kundala, marriage chart, and other positions of phavas. Grahas and Rashi are also very important, especially in Samhita Jyotisha, because there's no phava, there's a global chart, and we need to know the state of the graha. How do we know the state, well-being, effectiveness, and efficiency of a graha based on its position in Rashi? It's also located in a certain nakshatra. This is a more subtle, in-depth interpretation. It provides additional interpretations, but they're secondary and can be ignored. They can be neglected, as they say in mathematics. And before moving on to the first and second main parts, let's figure out if we know what Rashi and Nakshatras are and what the main difference is between them. Not in the mathematical or, mechanistic sense that, obviously, Rashi is 12 and Nakshatra is 27. Yes, we can divide the path of the luminaries and planets into either 27 parts or 12. And so we get sometimes Rashi, sometimes Nakshatra. But what is the essential difference between them? That is, in meaning, in essence, and can we call a Rashi a field or a Nakshatra a field? Very often, in poetic formulations in Jyotish, Vedic philosophy, they call a Rashi a field, sometimes a Nakshatra, although neither Rashi nor Nakshatra have a direct translation like a field. Why is this? Each Rashi belongs to a graha, and when something falls into this Rashi, the owner, the ruler of the place, the space, controls what has fallen into his possession, his domain, his vagina. So this field is like a territory of influence. The same thing with Rashi. The same goes for nakshatras, although there are 27 of them. They are also ruled by 9 grahas. When something or someone falls into a kshatra, that is, the ruler of that nakshatra, in other words, the ruler, the head, the king, the czar, who owns this domain, and he also influences. Therefore, this is also a field. Rashi, they exist in the human body. A person is vertical, and therefore Rashi are like vertical fields, that is, like levels or layers. And the levels of a person have functions. Therefore, if we take this connection between the concept of field and Rashi, it is functional. There is a field of abilities, a field of possibilities, a field of functions, a field of actions, interactions, life experience. Therefore, Rasha is a functional field, and 12 Rasha, are 12 chakras, or 12 functions, 12 abilities, 12 possibilities. And this is often called, Rashi is often called a field. Even in the book Brihat-Samhita, there's the word Kṣetra, which is literally translated as field, but, so to speak, metaphorically means the Rashi of a certain Phava as a territory of influence. So there. And there's a definition there that the Grahas manifest in the Phavas as spheres of life, while being in a certain field in Rashi. And this field is like a field that yields a harvest. This harvest can be called metaphorical or philosophical, yes, and figuratively, like a field where the seeds of karma, the seeds of actions, the seeds of deeds, decisions sprout. This is a field of fruits. And the fruits of what? Actions, decisions, that is, karma. Karma in the plural. Nakshatra. Since there are more nakshatras, this is a more fractional division. This gives a more fractional, that is, a detailed, refined, subtle range. The literal translation of the word nakshatra is a star, or a group of stars, that is, a constellation. In the context of Jyosha, it's sometimes translated as the position of the moon, not the star in which Chandra is located, or the constellation in which Chandra is located. Sometimes, too, they use the poetic pathos of, yes, a lunar mansion or a lunar station, that's it. But Chandra isn't there, so it's not appropriate as a mansion or a station. In a parking lot, immobile beings stand, while in a nakshatra, a graha passes through its padas at a certain, speed. There are two etymologies of the word nakshatra. One word means on, the other kshatra. Na is not, but kshatra is, changing. And therefore, nakshatra is those who do not change. This is what does not change, does not vary, does not move, that is, these are fixed stars or constellations that are static, in the good sense of the word, reliable, and guideposts for reporting the positions of planets as representatives of grahas. The second, less common, interpretation of the word nakshatra. Naksha and tra. Tra is a suffix, and naksha is a root that means to approach, to reach, to approach, to enter, to pass through, to be there, to abide in. Therefore, if we choose from this more suitable verbs for nakshatra, that is, nakshatras are what Chandra approaches, this is what Chandra passes through, this is where she, passes, yes, where she abides. What she passes through every night in her movement across the sky. That's why a nakshatra is also a field, but metaphorically, not a literal translation. And let's summarize this introductory part. Rashi. The main meaning of the word Rashi is not a sign or a constellation. It is a collection, a set, a cluster, you could say, a heap. But in the good sense of the word, right? A range is like a set of possibilities, right? For example, I have a set of keys, a set of tools, a set of skills, a set of abilities. Therefore, Risha is a collection as a set of a cluster, a range. That's it. And so it's a collection of qualities, a collection of abilities, a range in space. Nakshatra is a position that doesn't change as a reliable point of reference, right? And a stellar position, a position among the stars. And Kṣetra is a field in the most common sense. And therefore, Rashi as a field is a field of actions and possibilities, like the environment or conditions in which one must act, applying abilities, having a set of skills and opportunities. Nakshatra is a more subtle field, like in what microclimate all this will happen, right? In what aura, in what atmosphere, but not in the physical sense of the atmosphere, that is, in what comfort, but not in what microclimate or climate in the figurative sense of the word. And what unites them? This field is like a territory of influence. Someone falls into Rashi. These Rashis are ruled by Gra. They are under the influence of the Graha that rules them, under the influence of the ruler of Rashipati or Kshetrapati. The same with Nakshatra. Someone falls into a Nakshatra and is also influenced by the Graha that rules that Nakshatra. If we've understood this somewhat philosophical, abstract foundation, but nonetheless important, Then we'll move on to our viewers' questions. So the first question: how does the ruler of a nakshatra influence another graha that's in that nakshatra, as well as the phava in which that second graha falls, and the phavas that rule, well, the second phava? That's a long-winded question. If I shortened it, it would be something, well, incomplete, so it can't be asked more succinctly. So in this example, Shukra is in either the Ashliha, Revati, or Jeta nakshatra. This means it's in the Buddha nakshatra. Is it under the influence of Buddha? Yes. Will Buddha impart its essence and meaning to Shukra? It will. But in this situation, Shukra is in some phava. Will Buddha give the results of Buddha in this phava? Furthermore, it's sprinkled with some other phavas. Will Buddha give results in these two phavas? So for our answers, we use the books Jataka-bharanam, Predictive Vedic Astrology, Brihat-Parasharahura Shastra, and Brihat-Samhita. These are the most authoritative. 3 of them are classical. 1 of them is modern, but also very authoritative. The text is by Sergei Alekvich Stanislavsky. So Graha, well, the basic indications of authoritative books, its essence, its qualities, and the properties of the graha located in its nakshatra. Moreover, well, in this example, yes, Shukra is in a nakshatra ruled by Buddha, so it will act as if slightly tinged by Buddha, as if it were in conjunction with it, that is, as if it were under its influence, but not through a drishti view, not through a yuti conjunction, but through entering Buddha's field based on its position in the nakshatra. Furthermore, Graha, through this connection through the nakshatra, also influences phava. That is, Buddha will also influence the phava where Shukra is located in this example. Moreover, there will be an interaction between the two phavas, yes, the two spheres where Buddha and Shukra are located in this example. That is, there is no connection through Rashi. Let's say there are the phavas of Buddha and the phava of Shukra. But since Buddha is in the nakshatra, Shuk is in the Buddhi nakshatra, there is, as it were, a connection between these kavas. But this won't be as direct a connection as with the mutual connection of the yut, yes, with the mutual views of the drishta. It will be a subtle, well, not very manifest connection. Here is a connection through, well, a higher world, through sensations, through thinking, through ideas, through the higher manifestations of each phava, that is, at the level of thinking, at the level of awareness, at the level of personality and their interactions. Nevertheless, although this connection exists, it is secondary and primarily considers the interaction of the grahas, rashas, and phavas. And if we have already completed the basic analysis and interpretation, we have a ready-made interpretation. We should not change it, should not invert it, should not refute it. We can add some subtle, deeper, additional aspects to it. That's why interpreting grahas and nakshatras, including through their influence as falling within the field, must be done with caution and as additional clarifying, but not primary factors. Then there's an even more complex question. Well, it was formulated this way. How does a Devata influence? We know that such a Devata, the graha of the ruler of a nakshatra, influences another graha that falls within that nakshatra, the phava occupied by that other graha that falls within the nakshatra, and the phavas ruled by that other graha that falls within the nakshatra. That is, not how the graha itself influences, but its devota. Again, there are a lot of words, it's difficult to understand, and it's impossible to formulate it more succinctly. As an example, there's the nakshatra, Krittika. It is ruled by Surya, and those grahas that fall within Krittika fall under the influence of Surya. We discussed this in the first part of this video, but Krittika corresponds to Devata. Dava, well, here's a Devata Agni-Deva, and is Agni-Deva's influence on those grahas that fall under the influence of Krittika, ruled by Agni-Deva, and the phavas, where these grahas are located that fall under the influence of Krittika, and the phavas that rule the grahas if they fall under the influence of Krittika. In this situation, in this example, in Krittika, flattering. Here the answer is, one might say, the opposite. Well, let's say right away that the classical books don't talk about such an influence. And there's no explanation, but I'll give my understanding, my opinion, that is, how I would explain it. Devatas are spiritual beings or divine beings. Well, they belong to the higher world, the world of consciousness, yes, of profound experience, of high experience. And therefore, if there were a connection to the Kshatras of its ruler, not through a Devata, it would be, well, manifest and obvious. And if there were a connection to the Kshat through the Devata, this would indicate, well, very deep, subtle interactions that, well, they either don't materialize or are beyond our level of awareness to interpret. Therefore, here is my explanation for why the authoritative astrological sources of Jyotisha do not describe the connection or influence of the Devata of a nakshatra on what falls within that nakshatra, on the Graha itself, on the Phava where this Graha is located, and on the Phavas it rules. So what can be applied? The books contain very interesting information. These methods of applying or interpreting the Devatas. That is, we must remember that each game is itself connected to the Devatas, not through the nakshatra, but in itself. So, for example, Surya corresponds to Shiva, like Virgo. Chandra corresponds to either Gaura or Parvata, yes, sometimes Durga. Well, more often it is written that it is Gauri or Parvati. Guru corresponds to Brihaspati, but this can also be a guru, yes, and then it's in here. And therefore, if we want to take into account the influence of a Devata, then we need to consider the Devatas of the Karahi that governs the field of influence through Rashi and not through Kṣetra. And there is an even simpler but more effective use of Devatas. Here is the fifth Phava. It is responsible for many areas of life. Yes, there is inspiration, creation, guiding those whom I lead, followers, students, children, and so on. And there are such important meanings as, say, mantras or spells, right? That is powerful words, powerful sounds, yantras or visual images, symbols, images of powers that work, yes, amulets as objects of power, yes, objects, talismans, objects of power. And so, which devas, yes, or, to use European terminology, which gods will a person address with their mantras, spells, using their yantra images, perhaps icons, or perhaps murti, yes? Which amulets of which gods or devas will they use, which will strengthen them, and which will be the one they wish to address? They are indicated by the Graha in the fifth Phava. That is, each Graha has a Devata. If it is in the fifth Phava, then this is the Devata that will be awakened by words or sounds, that is, mantras, spells, as they are also called, incantations, yantras, that is, images, pictures, or amulets, as objects and things. Or, for example, people often ask, who is my, leading god? The main god is the patron god, right? That is, the benevolent Ishtad of the Devas. The patron Devata, patron Deva, or patron god. This is determined by the 12th Phava, but not always by Rashi Lagna. It can be determined by Surya Lagna, Makaraka, or Karakamsha. This is a question of 5 reference points. You need to remember that. But what devota is determined by the 12th Phava, and how exactly? The Graha located in the 12th Phava, if it corresponds to a devota, will most likely be, the closest devata for the person's patronage. Or, let's say a person wants to find a different devota for evolution, for dharma, for the right path, the right strategy. The devata for evolution is determined by the 9th Phava. Similarly, it can be several reference points from Rashi Lagna, Surya Lagna, Makaraka, or Karakamsha. But the 9th Phava corresponds to Dharma Phava, yes, one of its names. Therefore, the Graha in it is Dharmata. And even if we talk about these methods described in the classical books on Joshu, Jataka Shastra, and Hora Shastra, they repeatedly remind and emphasize that, first of all, we interpret the Grahas and the Phavas, then the Grahas and the Rashi, and only then the Grahas and the Nakshatras. This is like a third commentary, or, as we might say, a clarifying additional tertiary method, but not the main one for analysis, interpretation, and exposition. If we rely solely on it and incorrectly take into account the Graha+Bhava and the Graha+Rashi, then this, what should be tertiary commentary additional, can distort the essence and incorrectly give the main primary interpretation. That's it. And the Brihat-Samhita describes why this is so. It basically says that the Devatas are, what shall we call them? Those who live in the realm, right? Devaloks. Devaloks are one of the spiritual worlds. It is the farthest from matter, that is, the most absolute, abstract, and refined. In our technology, it is, one might say, the highest, the most sublime reality. That is why they are connected with the experience of this reality in a person. That is, with their spirit, consciousness, or lineage, yes, with their inner essence, with their spiritual aspiration or spiritual path, with their interaction with higher powers, spiritual forces, gods, and spirits, among other things. And what is important is the Deva and the connection with the Grahas and Bhavas, and not the influence of the Nakshatras and the Devas of the Nakshatras. And there was another interesting example. This is not in the book itself, nor the author's words. This commentator wrote, for example, how we interpret the conjunction of a Nakshatra's Devata with its Graha. There are 3 Nakshatras of Surya. One of them is Krittika, but only Krittika's Devata is Agnya. So what kind of Surya is it exactly? Surya is like Agnya, with the quality of Agnya, that is burning, right? And there's an example like when we take a magnifying glass or an optical lens, and then the sun becomes very burning, and it can light a fire or we can shoot it out. Or the penetrating Surya is fiery, like a Kshatriya, although he is a Kshatriya in himself, but he is even more of a Kshatriya, fiery, like cutting off the excess and selective and narrow-minded. Yes, it's somewhat similar to the quality of Mangal, but it's not the quality of Mangal, but of Agni. That is, selective, penetrating, highly targeted, purposeful. So there you have it. And there are some poetic examples, like how a ray of sunlight can burn through something if concentrated, focused, or a surgeon's scalpel can cut away something unnecessary in a person to improve their health. That's where we'll end. Thank you for such complex but interesting questions. Send more questions. This is my request. A request from our organizers and assistants. Please write your opinion in the comments to this video and share this video, apparently, only with those who will understand and appreciate it. Thank you for your understanding. We listened to Anton Kuznetsov and watched Vedavrat's YouTube channel. Yeah,